and the drug trade, made millions by the age of 26, and even once had $30 billion in cash. Pablo Escobar had it all. Imagine having so much money that you could offer to pay off your country's entire debt. But how did he manage to keep it from the government? Where did all the money go? And what happened during the last phone call that changed everything? Right at the start of his Medellin cartel, Escobar wanted to grow, and he wanted to grow fast. In 1982, Escobar's drug trade produced 80 tons of cocaine, which means that they supplied 80% of the world's cocaine, making $2 billion in revenue. By 1988, their production escalated to 500 tons, resulting in an annual revenue of $10 billion. And just 2 years later, the cartel reached an unprecedented production level of 800 tons, generating $420 million per week, which is more than $20 billion per year. So what exactly did a 38-year-old Don Pablo do with this amount of money? For starters, he owned countless motorcycles and luxury cars, including many Harley-Davidsons, a Mercedes S600, a Porsche 935, a Lamborghini LM002, as well as 15 planes, 6 helicopters, and several boats, along with a fleet of vehicles that he bought for smuggling drugs. He also bought a Learjet to fly his cash around, along with 2 submarines. But that was not enough for him. He went ahead and purchased a professional soccer team called the Millonarios FC, which is based in Bogota and competes in the top flight of football in Colombia. He ticked off the next few items on his bucket list by purchasing dozens of luxury houses in Colombia and even the rest of the world. His main home was a 7,000-acre estate in the jungle a few hours from Medellin, known as Hacienda Nápoles, with a value of $63 million. Built in the style of a Spanish colonial mansion that had every single luxury a guest could dream of. There was a separate party house, an airstrip, swimming pools, stables filled with expensive horses, tennis courts, a soccer field, go-kart track, a bullfighting arena, artificial lakes, a vintage car collection, and life-size dinosaur sculptures made from genuine prehistoric bones. But wait, there's more. This place even had a private zoo filled with 200 animals, including lions, zebras, giraffes, and hippopotamuses. And where did he manage to get them all? Well, according to his son, many of the animals were smuggled from all around the world into Colombia using Escobar's airplanes, and they did not come cheap. For instance, he paid around $2 million just for the elephants. To top it all off, the entry road to Hacienda Nápoles estate had an arch with a replica of the single-engine Piper Club airplane, the plane that had carried Escobar's first load of coke into the US, where Escobar also owned several properties in Florida. One of them was a minimalistic mansion in an exclusive Miami Beach neighborhood. The house had 8 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling glass walls, and wraparound terraces. It also had expensive lounge decks, an outdoor kitchen, an infinity edge pool, and soaring palm trees. What's even better is the property measures up to 10,000 yards, along with an incredible view of the downtown Miami Beach skyline. Next, there was Escobar's secret vacation spot, built on the quiet La Isla Grande, just off the Colombian coast. This luxury complex had a mansion and waterfront apartments, as well as a helicopter landing pad and a palm tree courtyard, centered around an enormous swimming pool. The estate had more than 300 well-appointed rooms for guests, and the bathrooms even had shower heads made out of solid gold. But both the Hacienda Nápoles and this secret getaway were not his most famous asset. You see, that would be the cathedral, a luxurious prison that he built and designed for himself. However, it was unlike any other prison on earth. Located high in the mountains above Medellin, La Catedral, also known as Club Medellin, was more like a resort than a prison. Here, Escobar's bedroom featured a circular rotating bed, and his bathroom had a private jacuzzi. The property includes a soccer field, discotheque, a bar, a large patio, and an enormous swimming pool with an artificial waterfall. But why would he build a prison for himself? It's because at the end of 1991, the glamour of Escobar's lifestyle was beginning to fall apart, thanks to his extremely violent methods. In 1989, he bombed a plane called the Avianca Flight 203, hurting 107 people. That same year, he bombed the DAS building, injuring 63 people. In 1990, he killed a man named Luis Carlos Galán, who at the time was running for president in Colombia. Following the chaos, he bombed 9th Street, where several more people got hurt. As Escobar's crimes got crazier, destabilizing Colombia, not even his charitable acts could save his reputation. In the past, he would donate to churches and hospitals in Medellin and other towns in the region. He built soccer fields, parks, and paved roads, and he even built a new neighborhood called Barrio Escobar, with 1,000 homes for families who previously lived in slums. According to some locals, Escobar would occasionally show up in the town square and hand out money. He even once dressed as Santa Claus and handed out presents to children. His charitable acts earned him the title Robin Hood. However, cynics viewed his acts as buying public loyalty and building a place where he could hide drugs, guns, and money. But just when the authorities were beginning to grasp the scope of his criminal enterprises, he somehow got himself elected to Colombia's Congress, and he offered to pay off the country's national debt of $10 billion, only if he would be exempt from any extradition treaty. But Colombia declined. He tried to control the government, but ended up getting kicked out of Congress and painted a giant target on his back. Almost everyone wanted him dead. Some even placed a bounty on his head, which is why Escobar ultimately turned to the Colombian government. And after 6 months of negotiations in secret, he was able to work out a deal. The deal meant that Escobar would go to prison, but he would get to choose which one. And in a surprising move, Escobar agreed. But not just to any prison, he built his own. Why? Because Escobar wanted safety and comfort even behind bars. Keep in mind that being in prison would also prevent him from being extradited to the United States. But even though Escobar was technically behind bars, he was still committing crimes. La Catedral had an office with cellular services, radio transmitters, computers, and a fax machine which allowed him to continue running his business from prison. And while living at La Catedral, when Escobar wasn't working, he regularly hosted drug and booze-fueled parties, often for his friends, family, celebrities, and prostitutes. If we're being honest, despite his lavish lifestyle, extravagant purchases, and charitable donations, Escobar simply loved wasting money. But his immense wealth quickly became problematic when he couldn't launder his cash on time. So Escobar started hiding his money all over the place. He began stashing piles of it in Colombian farming fields, warehouses, and in walls of cartel members' homes, often having his hitmen hide the money on his behalf and then killing them so that nobody else knew where the money was buried. But in 1992, all of the karma from his evil ways started catching up with him. No amount of money could save him from what was coming. After he murdered some rivals and buried them on the grounds of La Catedral, the Colombian government decided to move Escobar to a real prison. Catching wind of this plan, Escobar and his family went on the run, alternating between various safe houses. Then, on a cold winter night, while the family was living in a hideout in the Medellin mountainside, Escobar's daughter Manuela became hypothermic, and that's when he burned $2 million to keep her warm. According to his son, Pablo was earning so much cash that each year they would write off 10% of the money because the rats would eat it in storage, or it would be damaged or lost. And given how much money he was making, that 10% would be close to $2.1 billion. Escobar simply had more money than he knew what to do with. So losing money to rodents and mold wasn't a big deal. His only big issue was that he became the most wanted man on the planet. Even the FBI was trying to take him down. The Medellin cartel began to crumble under pressure from both the authorities and the rival gangs. And Pablo's actions were not helping his case either. And the only thing he had going for him was that nobody knew where he was. The notorious drug lord had somehow managed to keep himself perfectly hidden. He would remain that way until he made the mistake that almost cost him his life. Or so that's what everyone thought. 24 hours before his death, Pablo was celebrating his birthday, but not in the way he'd done it for the previous 16 years. This time, he was alone, with no party and no family. So where was his family? You see, at the time, his family was reportedly being held hostage by the government, and this means that their phone calls were being monitored. But how did they get here, and why weren't they with Escobar? Well, it had everything to do with the countless enemies Escobar had made over his career, who were hell-bent on wiping him, his family, his associates, and his legacy off the face of the earth. While he was hiding, these enemies went off to Escobar's family, and they were forced to flee the country. Escobar had already escaped La Catedral, and the Colombian government was unwilling to protect his family if he wouldn't surrender himself to the law. So, of course, Escobar's family chose Germany as their asylum. Unfortunately, Germany rejected them. And eventually, Escobar's family would find themselves back in the hands of the Colombian government, which had now chosen to use them as bait to smoke out this elusive drug lord. There was a ticking time bomb hovering over them as they were under the thumb of the government with 24/7 surveillance. There was a dedicated group of police and a unit called the Search Block, working hand in hand to triangulate the phone signal to find where he was. This force included 600 CNP officers, along with Delta Force officers and also Navy SEALs. So, at 2:35 p.m., when Escobar finally decided to make a call to his family, he sealed his fate right then and there. The task force was able to track him down and get to his location by 2:57 p.m., mere minutes after Escobar had made the call. It was the final minutes of the world's most powerful drug lord, and it was about to be a showdown. Escobar was still on the phone when he realized that his aunt's building was surrounded, and and everyone was fully armed. They were expecting heavy gunfire from his army of cartel soldiers. However, they would spot only his bodyguard, El Limon, who had abandoned his boss, trying to run out of the building and fleeing to the rooftops in an effort to save his own life. He was immediately killed, and then the search block stormed the house and blew the front door open with explosives, while Escobar greeted them with gunfire and took off for the rooftops in an attempt to escape to a side street behind the row of houses, but he never made it. He found himself cornered, so he opened fire on the search block and the Colombian police. The search block returned fire on Escobar, and he fell flat. According to official accounts, an unnamed member of the search block got close to Pablo and gave him the final shot, which ultimately killed him. Just 24 hours ago, he was celebrating his 44th birthday, but now he's dead. But what if this was all a part of Escobar's plan? His brother, Roberto Escobar, insisted that his death was a suicide, claiming that the location of his fatal wound was enough proof that it had been self-inflicted. When Roberto was much younger, Pablo would tell him that if he was really cornered without a way out, he would shoot himself through the ear. And according to his son, Sebastian, his father was well aware of the phones being tapped and monitored by the CIA and the Colombian authorities. He said that his father had told him repeatedly in the past to avoid phones. So why would he keep on calling them? On the day of his death, his father had called him 7 times. And despite him begging his dad not to call, he would insist on speaking with him. To Pablo, it was either him or his family. So he knew he had to die. After his death, the Los Pepes and the Cali cartel were able to steal some of his property. They also forced Escobar's family to sign over liquid assets. Meanwhile, the Colombian government was able to recover several of Escobar's cash stashes, especially when the authorities rounded up members of the Medellin cartel, who spilled the beans on some of the locations. The Colombian government seized Hacienda Napoles, La Catedra, the vacation mansion on La Isla Grande, and several other of Escobar's properties. The majority of the animals at Hacienda Napoles were transferred back to regular zoos. But then, for many years, the government ignored the property and nobody really knows why. However, fueled by rumors of riches hidden on the property, some treasure hunters tore down the walls of the main house, but sadly they found nothing. In 2007, the government transformed Hacienda Napoles into a theme park featuring life-size dinosaur models, family-friendly hotels. Residents of the region scavenged La Catedral, stripping its bathtubs, pipes, tiles, and roof materials. The property has since been rehabilitated by Benedictine monks who have turned it into an old folks home. The mansion on La Isla Grande, it's being reclaimed by nature. In the US, officials had seized the majority of Escobar's properties, including the Miami Beach mansion long before he died. And the house was eventually sold. And more recently, in 2016, it was torn down. Over the years, people have found Escobar's hidden stashes of gold bars and cash. And in 2015, a farmer found $600 million buried in plastic barrels in a field that he was digging up. But the money was later seized by the Colombian government. And since Escobar kept most of his money hiding spots to himself, a lot of them are still out there to be discovered. His cash deposits in Swiss banks, they're also still there, as only he knew the account numbers. And he took that information to his grave.